Unless you've been living under a rock these past few months, you heard of the Trump administration building up a huge military force in the Caribbean and tensions going up between the Maduro regime in Venezuela and the United States. In this video, I'm going to give you some recent history so you could better understand the situation and some analysis on what's been going on. During the Cold War, Venezuela was on pretty good terms with Washington. Anytime there was trouble in the Middle East that affected oil markets, Venezuela would step in and fill the gaps. From the Yom Kippur War to the Gulf War, the oil business made Venezuela rich as hell. Unfortunately, they had one issue. They spent money like crazy. One thing you should always do if your country is reliant on one industry, you want to make sure you make a lot of money and keep a lot of the cash. Venezuela didn't do that. When oil prices came down, so did their entire economy. And they did what countries always do, borrow from the IMF. And when you take money from the IMF, it comes with agreements.
Many of them residents of the poorest neighbourhoods that surround the capital are venting their anger at a raft of new government economic measures.
Reports speak of a frenzy of rioting and plunder.
They had to cut some government programs. Riots broke out. Banks collapsed. Riots broke out. This led to the presidency of Hugo Chavez, one of the biggest voices speaking out against the government. Chavez started to consolidate power in the government and in the state oil company, PDVSA. This led to a military coup against Chavez. The Bush administration recognized the new government within hours.
Let me share with you the administration's thoughts about what's taking place in Venezuela. It remains a somewhat fluid situation. But yesterday's events in Venezuela resulted in a change in the government and the assumption of a transitional authority until new elections can be held. The details still are unclear. We know that the action encouraged by the Chavez government provoked this crisis. According to the best information available, the Chavez government suppressed peaceful demonstrations. Government supporters, on orders from the Chavez government, fired on unarmed, peaceful protesters, resulting in 10 killed and 100 wounded. The Venezuelan military and the police refused to fire on the peaceful demonstrators and refused to support the government's role in such human rights violations. The government also tried to prevent independent news media from reporting on these events. The results of these events are now that President Chavez has resigned the presidency. Before resigning, he dismissed the vice president and the cabinet, and a transitional civilian government has been installed. This government has promised early elections. The United States will continue to monitor events. That is what took place.
Now, put yourself in Chavez's shoes. What does this look like? Why is the United States, the beacon of democracy, recognizing a brand new government that just got their power through a military coup? Even if the US wasn't behind it, from Chavez's perspective, it sure looks suspicious, doesn't it? Luckily for Chavez, he was able to rally people behind him and regain power within 47 hours. I believe that was the beginning of the rift between the US and Venezuela. After that, Chavez consolidated even more power because now he was justified, right? The big CIA is coming after him. The big US is after him, right? But one thing both Chavez and Maduro after him suck at is economics. Economic mismanagement led him to asking Russia and China for help, strengthening their relationship. Then Chavez kicks the can and we get Maduro. In March 2015, President Obama issued an executive order.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro lashed out at the U.S. after President Barack Obama declared Venezuela a national security threat.
President Obama has decided to put himself into a box of failure. He will be remembered in the future for his decision today and the aggression against the Venezuelan people.
In a further show of defiance, Maduro promoted intelligence chief Gustavo Gonzalez to interior minister. He's one of the 7 targeted individuals facing asset freezes and visa bans from the United States. The named officials are in the top echelon of Venezuela's security apparatus that was responsible for the violent crackdown on anti-government protests last year.
This is an implementation of what we've been working on for months, which is cracking down on those who are violating human rights.
And now, here comes the first Trump presidency and a very familiar face. Little Marco.
Don't worry about it, little Marco, I will.
All right, well, let's hear Big Don.
Don't worry about it, don't worry about it, little Marco.
Gentlemen, let's hear gentlemen.
You ought to show up.
Gentlemen, you gotta do better than this.
This guy has the number one
Mr. Trump, may I ask you,
absentee
Mr. Trump,
record in the United
I'd like to ask you a
States.
policy question.
Marco Rubio, who was a senator at the time, was Trump's main advisor on Latin America.
By specific individuals within the Venezuelan government who are stealing the money of the Venezuelan people and committing grotesque human rights violations and have real estate.
The New York Times called him the virtual Secretary of State for Latin America. And let's say, Little Marco is not a big fan of Maduro.
The government of Maduro is now relying on credit from all parts of the world in order to continue to sustain itself. I strongly urge any private investment banks, any of these large global banks who are thinking about lending money to Venezuela, you are abetting this regime and its repression.
The Trump admin introduced the biggest wave of sanctions against Venezuela. During the 2018 election, the U.S. administration backed a guy by the name of Juan Guaido. And of course, Maduro wins. And after the election,
as you know, on January the 23rd, President Trump officially recognized the president of the Venezuelan National Assembly, Juan Guaido, as the interim president of Venezuela. Venezuela's National Assembly invoked Article 233 of the country's constitution to declare Nicolas Maduro illegitimate. This action was a statement that the people of Venezuela have had enough of oppression, corruption, and economic hardship. We're going to announce sanctions against Petroleos de Venezuela, Sociedad Anima, or PDVSA, as it's known by its Spanish acronym, the state-owned oil monopoly.
Towards the end of his presidency, Trump's Department of Justice indicted Maduro and 14 of his officials on charges of narco-terrorism. So he was setting the stage for what's happening today, right? Now, here comes the Biden administration. Biden tries to reverse a lot of these moves and lifted some sanctions in exchange for fair elections. This is, of course, naive. Of course, Maduro breached the deal by not having fair elections. This brings us to today, the second Trump administration. And guess who's back? Little Marco, but this time, he's Big Marco, Secretary of State Marco. Maduro's government was designated a terrorist organization, and there's a big military buildup in the Caribbean. Now that we're all caught up, let's do some actual analysis. Over the last 20 years, the U.S. threw everything they could at Venezuela, politically, economically, underhand, overt, nothing worked. And right now, obviously, the last option left is the military one, and that's where we're at today. Like Clausewitz said, war is a continuation of politics by other means, right? The Trump administration kicked it off with political warfare. They ramped up their information warfare on Maduro by saying he's the head of a drug cartel that's flooding the U.S. with drugs. This is obviously intended to garner local support for a war in the U.S. population. The Trump admin ramped this up by building up a huge military presence. They also decided that they would fire missiles on drug boats and propagate that on social media, all to further the information warfare. Think of this sort of how Russia does hybrid warfare, where military actions are contributing to the information warfare. Trump supporters heard that Maduro is a drug dealer, but now they get to visually see the drug boats being blown up, right? Is this stuff factual? It's partially true. Venezuela is a big transshipment route, but most of the drugs don't actually come from Venezuela. It comes from places like Colombia. But who cares? This is information warfare. As long as something is half true, it can work. Is blowing up boats effective? Not really. If you want to significantly reduce the amount of drugs on the market, you got to go to where they're being produced. Just hitting boats, it's not going to solve anything. But regardless, none of this matters. This is part of the political warfare. It's part of the information warfare. But unfortunately, there's real blowback from this. Shooting missiles at drug boats is bringing the Trump admin a lot of bad PR. therefore defeating the whole point of the information warfare, right? There's not big enough return on investment from striking these blows politically. The pressure from the military buildup is working. Maduro seems to be negotiating. But the Trump admin is at rock bottom when it comes to political capital. Their approval rating is currently pretty bad. Maduro could see this as energizing. Trump can't politically afford to occupy Venezuela for any long period of time. And with the massive buildup in the Caribbean, if Trump doesn't make a move, he's going to look like the biggest pussy on the block. This is what happens sometimes when you set a big event into motion. Sometimes you think you're in control, but the event kind of takes a life of its own. So there are two potential roads here, and none of them are particularly great. The first one is war. Trump attacks Venezuela. No question the U.S. can take Caracas and maybe even kill Maduro. But the real question is, what now? This is the same question that came up in Iraq, right? Okay, we deposed Saddam. What now? Now you're responsible for a whole country with no plan. You can install a leader and leave, but no one's going to see the leader as legitimate. 2, you can make a deal. Make a deal that makes Maduro step down. This is the best option, but still a big question mark on what comes after. Venezuela is a country of 30 million people. Forcing political outcomes on a population is not really something the U.S. is good at. They could force an election, that would be the best thing to do. But knowing Trump and the U.S., they would want to interfere and pick someone they want to lead. Especially with idiots like this talking about taking oil.
Venezuela, for those Americans who do not understand why we need to go in, basically for three reasons. You're in Fox Business. Venezuela, for the American oil companies, will be a field day because it will be more than $1 trillion in economic activity.
The population would not trust that leader, and you would have a very weak government. As for Maduro, the best chess move is to make a deal with Trump that allows him to look good, but Maduro himself not give up too much politically. Choosing to slug it out with the U.S. military is never a good option. And I think this is the route he's trying to take. In conclusion, I'm not sure why Trump put himself in this position. Things like this are very easy to mess up and require a lot of competence and attention to detail to get right. It's so easy to mess this up. And people smarter than Trump have messed this up. So it's not looking good, but you never know. I could be wrong, but I'm probably not.